just started recording.
Alrighty. So today we're going to be going over the party in Parliament. Um, Everybody already has seen the outline of what we're going to basically be talking about today. Um, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. We're going to basically be trying to go over more so about the actual functions and not so much about the politics that are happening like right now. If you have
Probably
questions about
smart move.
that, yeah, because that way we make it a little bit easier to relate no matter what time it is. Like if you have an example, it might will not quite know what the example is, but we're gonna try to cover pretty much everything between those both. So, um, pretty much we'll be doing the party first, and the main purpose of parties is strictly parliament. I mean, they really have no other function to that except being able to show what damage you guys do together. Um, that it's strictly when it comes down to parliament, because to be able to get into parliament, you have to be into a party. You could be able to be governors and state leaders without being in a party, but to post bills, you have to be in a party. So it's really just a mixed way between it. But when it comes down to parties, one of the biggest functions of it is the gold wage. Um, to be able to get the gold wage, you have to be level 60. You have to be active 3 days in a row. When you go into the party page, you'll see a lot of people that have their little red check mark by their name. That is their, okay, you have been active the past 3 days, you're level 60, and you are adding into that gold wage. And that is what adds into the accumulated party wage. Um, a lot of statistics are run by who has the highest party wage, because that shows who has the most active members above level 60. So who has the most less noobs basically in the game. Um, Whatever. Um, but when it comes down to it, though, the only people that actually gain the party wage and gain the gold wage are secretaries and the leader of the party. So there's a party wage of 200 and there's five secretaries, all the secretaries and the leader gets about 45 gold. It's completely split up down the middle. This is basically the only way of gold making in the game is wages, besides actually mining. Um, One of the biggest ones, obviously, is Army of Farmers right now. They basically do what's called a cash wage party, which they'll pay everybody a daily wage and they'll keep all the gold. And well, they have, I think, 48,000 gold a day or something to that point right now.
Hmm.
Um, but
Wow.
they have basically one of the highest
Should they?
gold wages in the game. They have 11,920 gold a day in their party wage. So a lot of parties will just pay their members and be able to just rack in a gold wage. And so they can keep all this gold and do perks and mine and gain free to be able to pay for the wages of the party. But for the most part, there's not so much that you can really do party wise. So as an actual party functions, there aren't like party missions or anything else like that. It's just strictly who you're together with, and the party wage system is about the only real function of a party besides parliament. Um, for the most part, people usually keep secretaries to people who are like leaders of parties. This just because secretaries can be able to accept new members in, and because of this, they could be able to. I've seen parties basically be spammed by Turkish because of letting in one wrong secretary, and they just accepted a shit ton of Turkish members that overtook parliament because it's complicated when it gets to parliament. I'll get into it later, but as long as your parliament has the seats, if you jump into a party after the votes are done, you could be able to completely swarm those seats. So it's a tactic a lot of people use to soak up independent regions. But um, for the most part, um, lost track there for a second. But for the most part, rising in ranks is just basically a lot of parties have oligarchies. They usually have authorities, councils, stuff like that. Sometimes it's just a dictatorship where it's just the leader does everything and everybody else just follows. Um, so it just kind of depends on how and what party it is really rise up in. And it breaks down to basically a lot of times your activity, how much wars you do with them, because you can be able to check your war damage and who actually participated and all of these. And a lot of people on here take it kind of seriously and keep track of everything. So you want to show your effort if you ever want to rise in a party. The more effort you show, the easier it is to rise. It's kind of elementary in a way, but you got to do your time. And so, like I was saying, other with parties, one of the biggest things that a lot of people do um, is independent regions will swarm parliament. So there are different tactics to parties, though, that you could be able to use without actually having functions. So one of the ones that we have dealt with in the past, when we first created our first Stardust state, we went against a party called the War Dogs, who for at first only had two people in the party. But they had roughly about 90 to 100 people ready to vote, and about half of them were part of the party, just haven't left the other party yet. So when we got done voting, we won parliament by a few votes, but they had a lot more members that just started swarming the party. So we had to pull in friends from a different party, pull in friends from the UK, and everything else. So we basically had to outmatch their party parliament, or they could easily impeach the president, open borders, send more mercs in, and overtake the state easily. It's when it comes down to fighting in independent regions, votes matter the most, and the first vote is indeed one of the most important when it comes to parties because, like I said, you can impeach and you can flood the state quick. But then again, if you have a good president, they can be able to set the right MOF, block permits, be able to get their people in fast enough, and be able to outmatch their votes before the impeachment. So it just depends on who you know, who's quicker, and how you do it. There's other ones like, the actual flooding of the actual parliament, one of the tactics that someone else was trying to teach me, which I didn't exactly do with him, but I saw it happen, is he turned around and had a party inside of a state, and he had a few people just vote for him. So he had some mercs come in, be able to pay for the votes. It was actually about a 3 or 4 party system. And he was just one person coming in. But what he did is he had enough mercs be able to get into the state to be able to vote for him. And he flooded the parliament. And then as soon as he did, he had all of those mercs jump into his party. And he was able to consolidate off regions. And they had no time to be able to deny it. It's Parliament is very, very tricky, and that's why everybody goes for monarchy because you need the monarch vote to pass anything. So there's different ways you can use parties to flood, take over states, being able to take over independent regions even when it's not yours. You just comes down to how many people you can get, how fast you can be able to react, and sometimes it's how much money you have. Um, There's not very much more so mechanics of working the party itself. Um, I've basically been leader most of the times I've been in parties, and so there's really not much to the party that you can really do. You can add the picture, change the name, change the description, and then you can be able to change if people have to apply first and be able to be accepted in, or if you have to personally send the invites. There's some other functions when you go onto computer. There's actually a mass invited function that's supposed to be inside of parties, but it's kind of hidden settings, and you can't. It. I don't personally play on the computer too much, um, so I haven't been able to test this function. I've just heard of it personally. So there's no really, I can't verify that it's actually true, and I don't want to go ahead and say that it is, but for the most part, when it comes to inviting people, the only way you can know it that I know for a fact is by actually messaging and looking through people. Something I used to do back in my first parties. Um, is that we would get so quick on members, 20 to 30 members within a week, because I would go through each and every state and I would look at the bottom list of people that did not have parties. So always, the 90s, the 80s, and most of the 70s would already have parties because they've been around long enough, they found their place. But all these below 70s, there's still half of them without parties in mostly every state. So you could jump around and just send invites to all these people, and guaranteed a good 1 out of 10 would probably join. In fact, we ended up getting up to 25, 30 members just this way, just running around inviting anybody and everybody. And it ended up building a good people. But the thing is a lot of the people, as everybody will see while you play the game, is they'll jump in and play for a day or two and then just go inactive.
Howdy there.
What's up, Vic?
It's your boy.
Welcome to the party. See them rubber cheeks, buddy.
So,
So what's
good
what's
job.
going on?
We're about talking about the parties right now. Um, Talking about different mechanics of the parties and how parties work, I guess.
All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, I lost my place there. But anyways, I think I covered the most part about parties without going into actual parliament.
Cool.
But if anybody has questions about different anything about parties, though.
So let's explain why communism is not a good choice. I
Okay,
think
so that
several
reflects
members
a
leave
little
it
more to governments. Okay, so governmental, like the different forms of government, the most absolutely effective way is monarch. So communism does not work because it does not actually have a real function in this besides dictatorship. That's the only communism approach that you could be able to do here. There is the governmental republic, which you could be able to vote on your president, and everybody has the equal vote, including the president himself. Um, there is dictatorship, which the dictator has and basically auto pass on every law except certain ones that automatically have to take 24 hours, like region consolidation and stuff like that. Um, with monarch, everything has to get the monarch vote. So if there's a law that is winning by everybody else, but monarch says no, then it doesn't happen. But monarch doesn't have the auto pass feature like the dictatorship. And then there is one party system, which I guess could kind of work for communism as well, but the one party system just states that only that one party could put up any type of votes and be able to vote in the parliament. and that can't be changed because the leader is a dictator in that scenario, and there's no elections. Just the dictator owns that entire fucking state, and no one else can put up votes. Period. So communism does not work because there really isn't a way to split up the state profits. Um, the way that communists are running, let's just take it to a fact, even though I say take out of real world situations, but TCA right now, they want their own state. They want to be able to attack the United States and be able to let domain in and all this. It's just all communists do is just create chaos. Now, except a few couple that, like, example, the moon one. There is the German community that actually run a communist moon state. And they operate, I believe, on a one party system. But for the most part, when it comes down to commie parties, they're usually low level people who just came in and made their own party. And they're just running off revolts and coups because we're in a monarch state, or they don't like the actual leader, or it's always something. No one actually
Petty
comes
shit.
into the. What was that?
I said some petty shit.
Yeah, no one ever actually comes into this game when it comes to communism to actually support communism. They come into this game to be communists because they want to attack, revolt, and cause chaos. That's why communist parties usually 99% of the time don't last. Again, there are communist states that do last for a little bit, but eventually most of them go to Nazism or Reich, and it just ends up bans, and it's no fun for anybody. So
pretty-
communism 99% of the time does not work in this game. So anything else though?
Hey, I have an idea. What if we all start a communist party and convert all of our gold into cash?
No.
You can't convert gold into cash. You convert gold into energy
No,
drinks and then
I
work
was
it
just
out.
joking.
But I
It's
know,
the
I
new people stereotype.
know. All right, but let's go a little bit into Parliament because I know um, more or less people know some of Parliament, all of Parliament, none of Parliament. It's just no one's really had the ability to be able to actually see a lot of these things happen. Um, I have. I've been state leader enough, governor, all of this, so I could basically go through most of it. Um, so when it comes down to Parliament, everybody knows the importance. I'm just gonna fucking skip over that. But there are different types of actual parliaments. There's, of course, the autonomy parliaments, and then there's actual state of parliaments, and there's independent parliament. Independent parliaments are those that usually are just established states. They basically run off of the one election, and it's everybody's with an equal vote. The state parliaments, of course, run with all the governmental forms that we have said, and they have an absolute full parliament, from anywhere from war declaration, budget transfer, selling, resources, all of this. They have the full list. You can be able to see this by going to any state parliament. The autonomy parliament, though, is a lot different. So I'm actually everybody here can been able to actually see the autonomy parliament, what you can do. But sadly, with the autonomy parliament, we don't have any auto pass features. It just comes down to what we can be able to do. It comes down to a very short list, and again, autonomy parliament as well. Usually does not have a state title and does not have a state coat of arms unless you attach more regions. So just one autonomy does not have its own like actual parliament. It's just the one state. Uh, governors though don't have really any power either. And I'll make that very clear. All governors are fucking cash bags. They dump their money into building regions. They get no benefit from it. They get no real wage from it except a small gold wage. Like I do 3 regions right now, and I think I get 20 gold a day, which really is nothing. Um, and they can't auto pass laws if there's parliament there. They have equal vote of everybody, so they really have no say over anything. It's really ridiculous the way mechanics here have made governors like basically just patsy toys. But autonomy parliament does suck. But um, so be able to place and use different type of the bills. I'm gonna try to go over most of them and usually be able to tell what all of them will do. But just trying to look it up here. So there are a lot of different building things you got to know. So when it comes to placing a building law, one of the first things you definitely have to look out for is the power plants. So there, about half of the buildings that there are powered by power. House funds, military academies, and what's the other ones? Crap. Hold on one second. The military bases and house funds and are not run by power. Everything else is run by power. I know there's also Moon. They do not have missile systems or airports. They just have moon stations and refill stations. Those are run on power too. But the way that the power comes down to is it's basically a 1 to 5 output. So when it comes down to hospitals, if there's 1,000 hospitals, um, you're going to need about 200 power plants to be able to power that 1,000 hospitals. So technically, by standard of the game, it's a 10 to a 2 factor, but I always do 1 to 5 because it's a lot easier to do when calculating. Um, so when there's a lot of times that people will not launch these power plants, and it'll come down to if you do not have enough power plants to do your buildings, you'll lose the buildings. I think it's like a 1% of the building that's overdue will actually lose per day until it matches enough to keep up with the output. So a lot of people will drop a lot of money into these regions, not knowing to keep up with the power plants, and then start just losing all these levels that they just drop money into because they didn't keep up with power plants. So it's very important when you're doing buildings to keep up with it. When it comes down to actual what type of buildings you want to put down, everybody knows about the indexes. There's medicine, there's the military, there is the schools, and then there's a housing. Um, Military gives you a better energy boost. Hospitals give you better energy boost. Military affects the defense and attack damage of the actual starting fight. Schools give you faster perk training, and housing gives you cheaper house building, I do believe. I'm not 100% sure on that, but housing as well prevents coops. So anything one you can be able to coop. Once you be able to keep it to 2 and above, you can't be able to coop a region. So the rest of the ones, though, missile systems, seaports, spaceports, airports, they all rely on the attack and defense of the region and as well how much damage you do. So if you have a 2,000 airport like Arizona does right now, and you're fighting a region with a 1,000 airport, you are going to be doing a bonus damage on your actual airplanes. against the other region because your airports are higher. Also, as well, when it comes down to Earth regions attacking moon regions, you have to have the top 20 in spaceports rating place to be able to do this. So, what that means is your spaceports have to be in the top 20 rating on Earth to be able to launch an attack on a moon region. Usually it's like right now it's like 16, 1700, but you got to be able to keep up with how much it is. You'll see a little check mark by the regions if you look at their spaceports, and that means they are able to be able to launch space wars. But for the most parts, that's basically what all the buildings do and how they affect the state within itself. Everybody knows about, well, resource exploration. What this does is just refills your region resources. You'll have the main ones: gold, oil, or uranium, diamond, helium, and oxygen. I think it is are the ones that do not tap out. So helium, I believe, is much more in produce on the moon, so it has like a much more higher rate. And oxygen you can only get on Earth. I gotta be able to check the wiki to be able to make sure on that, but I would suggest look. But I do believe that's how it works with the oxygen and helium. They're not too big, so it's not really a common thing to pick up. I probably should have learned about that one a little bit more, but um, when it comes to the exploration and basically the MOE kind of controls all of that. The MOE has a auto pass feature on any type of exploration, whether it be deep or just refills. Um, they could be able to as well do multiple regions at once. So when you have multiple regions in the states, the MOE could be able to add up to 4 regions per tick. So you could be able to refill 4 states at one time. You'll have a little explore another region, which will be a blue button if you do have it, and you could be able to add multiple states in it. That's how you'll be able to keep up with the bigger states. If you have 50, though, you still have to do it like 12 or 13 times just to be able to refill everybody. And that's why bigger states, MOEs, will forget little regions because they won't actually go back and forth. They will just look at it once and be like, okay, this one, this one, this one, this one needs it, and they'll forget a good handful of them. It happens a lot. So when doing MOE of big ass regions like that, it's very hard to keep up with everything. MOE, yeah, Minister of Economics. So so the next one as well is military agreements. So what military agreements is it basically it gives you an agreement with another state that they can be able to help in wars. So if another state is close enough and occupying with each other and they have a military agreement together, if one of the states are in a war, the other state can fight their war from their country. There's always damage like debuffs. So depending on distance, the farther the distance, the less you'll actually do because there'll be a bigger debuff, all the way up to like 99%. So you'll want to be most of the time military agreements are with states that are close to each other. That way they could be able to actually do more than 10% of the damage. There's been times that I've jumped into wars on a full auto and come back an hour later and realize I've only been doing about 8% of the damage that I should be doing. It sucks sometimes.
Sounds like it. Jeez, I'd be pissed.
Yeah, it's you definitely want to check this when it comes down to military agreements because there will always be a little red box that will say this has a distance penalty, and it could be 8% or all the way up to mine was a 92% distance penalty. So instead of doing a million damage, I was doing like 8,000 damage. So you always want to check that distance penalty. The other part is deep exploration. Um, what this does is there's a normal cap to each region on resources. So the normal cap for gold is anywhere between 250 and 350, but it gives the region about an extra 100 to be able to be deep explored. What this does is it'll take this 350 region and you'll have a 450 cap. This lasts for a week and it turns around as well, has a boost. I believe it's like a 1% or 2% boost to like production rates. I gotta double check the actual percentage rates as well, but basically what it does is when you deep explore the region and you're building for gold, you'll every 10 of gold you'll earn an extra one. So it's actually close to about 10%. It'll basically increase your amount that you're making every time. It'll increase your cap and as well it'll use it slower from what I've heard. So it'll drain resources slower so you could be able to last longer as well. So the other ones of course are war declarations. There's war declaration, sea war declaration, and space war declaration. Again, you cannot do space war declaration unless you're actually on the moon or you're again in a region that has that check mark next to the spaceports. Sea war declarations, they end up becoming a two-war battle here because what happens when you declare a sea war is you will fight in the actual sea war, and then as you win the sea war, there will be an actual ground war, which is basically a landing war, I guess you can say. A lot of people as well call it a paratrooper war because you will see a little like parachutes kind of logo on the actual war itself. So the war declaration, though, it's very specific to what your region can be able to touch. Um, for example, you can't declare war on England from, you know, New Mexico. It's just the distance between it. There's no water between it. You can only declare ones that are right next door to you. So other countries as well, this is why this game has been able to be able to do this is, the French will create allies with the people next door, say Germany or Spain, and that will be able to protect their borders because they would have to go through Spain or Germany first to be able to get to France. The only other people can do it will be British or say one of the islands that are out there that are close to it. This is as well why the Russians have been able to attack America constantly because they have an island sitting right by Alaska that they can be able to just jump to and attack. So you have to be able to border regions for a war declaration. Another one is the region consolidation. So what this does is it transfers one region to another state. To be able to complete this though, the other state has an hour to put up a consolidation confirmation. What that does is it confirms, yes, I agree to accept this region into our state. If it's after the hour, then it voids out and it doesn't work. So it's very important. This is basically like a failsafe in a way that you can't just send your region off to, let's say, Novice Island or some other stupid thing and completely lose the region altogether. So there's also the new parliament election, which is basically restarts the new parliament. Sell resources. It sells the resources on the state market. The state market is a specialized market away from the actual market. You could be able to go into it by your storage and go to the little three dots at the top left, and at the bottom it'll say state market. Um, State leaders and MOEs are allowed to be able to buy and from this, and MOEs as well can sell to the state market and auto pass. This allows the state to be able to get state cash, which again they can spend on the state market or sell off for actual cash to buy resources or whatever the trade may be. Um, Governors can be able to buy from the state market, but they cannot sell to the state market. Only the actual state can, because autonomies can be pulled a lot. And if the autonomy is pulled while the sale is still in the market, the sale goes through, but the money goes bye bye. It just doesn't get sent to anything because there's no autonomy to send to anymore. So you can only send resources to a capital of either the autonomy or a capital of a state. You cannot send to, let's say, New York if Chicago is the capital. It'll just end up sending to New York if it's autonomy. If it's not an autonomy, it disappears. So it's very important that you send to the capital of everything. Budget transfer, you could be able to transfer whatever is in the budget, different amounts, to whatever countries that's out there. Again, you can only transfer it to a capital. You can't transfer it to one of the random regions that are there. So that's kind of important when it comes to budget transfers. Um, there's a couple different taxes. There's the factory output tax. There's market taxes. There's actual just regular tax. What this is the regular tax is what cash that they take from. So if you're working in a gold market or a gold factory, or if you're working, let's say, an oil factory that has a cash wage, that's what you're losing. So when you're looking at the regular tax, that is strictly cash. When you're looking at the factory output taxes, that's what they're taking from the factory itself. So if you're mining oil or you're mining ore, they'll be taking 12% or 10% of that resource, and that will go to the state or to the autonomy. And then you get the rest, minus, of course, the factory taxes. That factory tax goes straight to the factory. Then there's market taxes, which a lot of people keep an eye on, because you when you sell to the market, let's say you mined a billion oil, you turn around and you put that billion oil in the market. Well, that market tax can be 10%. You just took 10% of all that cash that you from the oil you just sold. So if you only get a billion, they just took 100 million for you from the state for the state. So it's very important to watch the market tax. Personally, anything over 1%, I would say is kind of high or outrageous. So if you find places 10, 15, 20%, don't sell any resources there because you will lose a lot of profit from mining. Migration agreements are tricky. Um, what this allows is the other state to be able to quickly move anybody over without having to get residence. So if America had a migration agreement with Mexico, we in Mexico had a war, we could quickly have everybody jump there from a certain region and be able to automatically jump to Mexico without having to wait for work permits or wait for residency or wait for anything. This was very important in world wars because it would allow people to quickly, one country would open up a migration agreement with 20 different countries, and they would all be able to come to this one and be able to fight for it without having to have the leader on for the next 10 hours accepting work permits for this person, that person, this person, that person. It just made it a lot easier to work with. So, but again, migration agreements is for the whole country. So if America opened up for Mexico, anybody in America could go to Mexico without any worries. So it's not something a lot of leaders do because of security interests. We don't want to open up America to Mexico and have some Russians here or some Russians in Mexico that will come to America and start revolts and things while they're just trying to come and help us. So you got to be careful when you open a migration agreement because you might just open it up to the enemy. Open and closed borders basically are just that. Your borders will open, your borders will close. There's a certain rate in which your borders will cost you to be able to stay closed. If they're open, it doesn't cost you anything. But if they are closed, it turns around and costs you a certain amount per region. There was an update that came out a few months ago that had a few outrages that will continuously raise the border, the amount that you would have to pay to be able to keep the border closed. And it got so outrageous that it was like for one region, it was almost it was a couple trillion a day just to be able to keep up with all of these border updates. And it was just getting more and more that it basically would tax out these big regions, would be just dumping anywhere from 10 to 20 trillion a day into resources just to be able to keep up. And of course, most of them were able to with how much they were getting in taxes, but some people were failing and losing that, and then the borders would open, and even for an hour could be deadly. So it was a good thing they kind of took that out, but it was kind of made it more competitive. Then, of course, you have travel fee, which is basically based on your level. Um, I think the basic one is about $45,000 per level. So whenever you're traveling, let's say to one region to another, you're paying a travel fee. And that travel fee is basically based on your level that you're paying to the state or to the region that allows you to travel along. Hold on 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. But other than that, we have a few other ones left. There's parliament size, which just changes the parliament. With this, it just gives more parliament seats to bigger parties. The state title, which is kind of self-explanatory. It gives you the actual title of the state, the name of the state. There's the state coat of arms, which is the picture of the state, basically the picture that you see when you look at the state. There's leader impeachment, which again I was talking about earlier when it comes down to how parliaments can be able to take over states by impeaching the president and then basically install on their own and closing borders and all of that. The leader impeachment is a way that they've been able to do that. Basically, restarts the leader election and allows anybody with a vote in primaries to be able to be voted up for president. So it's usually doesn't go through a lot, but something to worry about. There's a residency one, which you just it's the same thing. You got to pay to stay for residency. Autonomies management, which is just it adds into which regions are their own autonomies, which ones add on to in another autonomy. No, there's actually, I think, there's an attached autonomy bill. So that one is if you want to add more autonomies to an autonomy, more regions to an autonomy. Independence Declaration, it sets the region independent. There's a transfer state capital, which is it just transfers the state capital to a different region or city that you choose. and there is a autonomy governor, which is um, you could be able to set the governor for each autonomy. So that's basically all the bills of the state. If anybody has questions about the different bills and use them or why to use some of them. But other than that, that's basically the basis of all of the parliament, what the parliament bills do, what autonomy needs to do. Autonomy has a much like less value to it. I think there's only like 10 different bills that you can pass. You can't sell resources, you can't declare war, you can't change the governor, you can't do like any of that stuff. You can do is build, change taxes, change title and name, and then change the parliament size. Okay. So, is there any questions right now? No, I see thick typing, so.
Yeah, thick is typing. Says going back to the governor thing, what is the point of becoming a governor if there is basically no economic return?
So, there is economic return to the actual state. There is an economic return to yourself. You get, I believe it's 6 or 8 gold per undeveloped region and about 8 to 10 gold per developed region. Um, that's the only income to you. So the benefit of actually having an autonomy though for the economy is you could be able to set aside different resources to be able to develop. You can be able to give players the chance to be able to develop their own regions and hold their own budgets and all of that. But truthfully, honestly, all autonomies are puppet states that just governors usually drop money into to be able to build regions within the states while the state doesn't need to spend the actual resources to build. There really isn't a return for governors at all, besides the very tiny amount of gold you get. So there, the also another thing though, when it comes down to it, Minister of Foreign Affairs. I didn't cover him at all. Basically, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, what it does is that you be able to pass military agreements with an auto pass. So setting up agreements with different countries and as well migration agreements. Only leaders and MOFAs is what they're called, MOFA. Um, they're able to auto pass. Also, as well, another thing with state leaders is they can be able to do what's called sanctions, which is basically they can go to a country and disallow and allow imports. Basically, they disallow and allow imports or exports in the actual market. Uh, there's actually been some different strategies against different countries that a whole entire block will go against a country and disallow imports and exports, a full embargo, and they literally the prices of resources for these countries will jump up to like twice the price of resources because all the cheap ones are the massive countries that just embargoed them. So I believe that's pretty much most of the parliament. So, any other questions?
says, what does getting seats on the parliament do?
So to be able to get a seat on the parliament, you have to be at least a level 60. And getting a seat on the parliament, you either have to get a vote to the primary or be the highest level. Um, Getting a seat on the parliament, you're able to post and vote on bills. You have to be able to be in the region to post a bill, but you could be able to vote on a bill. I believe it's if you're within 2,000 miles or kilometers, I believe. I don't remember how it's done on the game, but if you're within distance, you can still be able to vote on the certain bills. You just won't be able to actually put them up. So if you have a seat in the parliament, that's basically uh, your power of the parliament. That's your seat in Congress. You could be able to put up bills or vote on them, deny them, or whatever the case may be.
Says, should we ask before we put up bills?
Um, it is very important, especially to like a bigger states that you kind of work with the state. Now, let's say you throw up a random building law. Now, you may look at it and be like, oh, there is enough resources there to build this building. But you accidentally spending all the resources to keep the budget going for the borders. So you accidentally trip the borders and they're now open. Or all these were being built for, let's say, to raise a housing fund to prevent coups. And well, you just spent the coup money and now their states are in coup and they lost one of their regions. So it's kind of is important to like kind of keep up with, I guess, the state. If you don't know if you should post it, you should probably ask about it just to be safe. That you're not like about to trip a state into open borders or there's not anything planned. Um, I guess it depends on which state you in and how they react to other people doing it. For the most part, they want more experienced players to play spills because they're more into it that know what they're doing and more aware of what they're doing. The best place to start when it comes to learning when and how to play spells is to get into an autonomy because most likely you will get the seats that you almost guarantee that you will get a seat unless you're in a big autonomy. And this will allow you to use resources without tripping borders or doing something big. And usually governors are much more easier to talk with than actual state leaders. So you'll actually have a chance to learn a little bit about what you're doing.
I don't see anyone typing right now. I think maybe
Yeah, is
sex back.
there
Oh, no.
anybody else that has any type of questions about parties or how they work or parliaments or how they work?
No response.
All right, does it look like it? So, for the most part, that basically covers again, um, the parties and what they can do, and as well the parliaments, down to their bills, when to place it and how to, um, which could be auto passed and by who, declaring wars and doing the migration agreements, and as well doing disallowing and allowing exports and imports and embargoes. It also explained a little bit more into the difference between states and autonomy regions and as well went in a little bit into governor and leader positions. So I'm hoping the next talk I can actually get into more advanced functions, more of the political spectrum behind RR, as this talk has already been almost an hour long. I don't want to drag on way too much longer for this one. But I wanted to basically cover the basic functions and some of even the more advanced functions and the way people use parties and parliament to be able to work around it. But there are a lot more other functions I will want to get into and be able to tell everybody. But so yeah, that's pretty much gonna conclude it for this time. Again, if anybody else has questions before we do, then feel free to ask. But if not, then I think that should do it for tonight.
Sweet. Well, Abra,
Yes.
for doing that and being involved. We hope that, you know, you hoped to hear about tonight was explained thoroughly.
Well, I tried to go into as much that I could that the outline was. Um, for the
Did
most
great.
part, I mean, I got into everything that I wanted to cover with the outline. And
Yeah,
again, I do want to do more of the advanced functions that people do, but you have to be able to learn the first kind of basic ones that they do first to understand why and how.
of
So
course.
we'll go through that next time, which again, we could do this few days or a week. I want to hopefully be able to have more people that come along. I want to post. Hopefully, Tommy here got it all recorded as well, so we could post this and have those people that weren't here be able to catch up on it. So, but if you guys did as well, I will when we do the next one, I'll post an outline and I want you guys to think of questions and think of things or instances in which people did this or that and ask why they did this or that. You know, I'm more than happy to ask as much and help as much as possible. So, talking like this is a lot more easier and informative than reading bunch of paragraphs. Again, with how much stuff that I just covered in the past hour, it would take you almost half a day reading through all the tutorials and stuff that would say the exact same thing. So, if this is again, I'll let you know, I'm happy to help. This is, it's the reason why we put this, and hopefully next time I'll get another outlet put together on probably how war reacts and damages, or if there's anything else that you guys want me to come up and talk with. Again, just let me know, and I will be happy to put it into the next talk. So, but I do think I need to get off to go to my daughter. So, good day, everybody. And well, I'm gonna go ahead and sign off now.